All right. So, we've talked about the good of Apple, right? But can we talk about the bad for a second? I feel, Oli, like we've had a few swing and a miss situations in the last, let's just round up and say 2 years between Apple Intelligence and then like the iPhone Air. It seems like they're trying to figure out if they're going to discontinue that thing or not. The Vision Pro, it already sounded like they were thinking about discontinuing that thing. They're not working on the cheaper version anymore. It sounds like they've shifted to glasses. And then Siri just really sucks. Oh my goodness, they all activated. What was I thinking?
Yeah, you can say that. But yes, I would agree. Siri is terrible, and it always have been. And actually, I think it's getting worse too. Which you think with Apple
Yeah.
Intelligence, it should be getting better. And I guess supposedly they're coming up with now they're going to base it on Gemini, which is fine. I don't really care what they use, but it is pretty sad. The one thing though, I'm going to be the dissenting one. I actually have an iPhone Air, and I actually really like it.
I'm okay with that. The the reason I don't have an iPhone Air is because I'm still rocking my 16 Pro Max. I didn't see any justification to get a new iPhone. So that's what I will use for another year.
I,
Unless
I, I had a
unless somebody
15,
in my
so
family needs an upgrade. How I do it, I don't know if you guys do the same thing, but like I've got my whole family and my mother-in-law are all on my plan. So like my mother-in-law, she's due for a new phone. I think she's using an iPhone 12. So I will upgrade my phone and I'll give her my because mine's great. And she probably needs a bigger screen anyway. So yeah, that's what I'll do. All right, so it's been a few minutes. Typically what I like to do, just for those of you who are really confused why we're talking about Apple stuff, is I like to just banter for a few minutes while we wait on everyone to kind of join us. Um, in a couple more minutes, we'll kind of dive into a little bit about Oli and me for just like a 30, 60 seconds. Why should you listen to what these guys have to say? I'll launch a poll so we can get to know you a little better. And then we're going to dive right into our discussion on what would we do differently if we were starting an MSP today. About halfway through, we'll take a little break for commercials. It'll be like 5 minutes or less, guys, and then we'll go right back into it. Um, Meanwhile, if you have questions, um, pop them in chat. If you want to use Q&A, you can, but I'll keep an eye on chat. I'll keep an eye on Q&A. This is as much your session as it is ours. So take advantage of having Oli and me here available to answer every possible question you could think of. Even hey Oli, what's the meaning of life?
about 42.
42. Perfect. Yeah, see, we're gonna handle everything, guys. Okay. No question is off the table, except maybe like politics. Let's avoid politics.
Yeah.
There, like all the hot button issues, let's skip those. But all right. Well, uh, so for those of you who don't know me very well, my name is Steve Taylor. I do webinars here at Alternative Payments, which is, I gotta say, a really awesome gig to have. I ran my own MSP for over 10 years. I've been an IT professional since 2002. So I'm gonna give you the farmer's insurance statement. I know a few things because I've seen a few things. So I've been around the block. I remember when you would buy a perpetual license of software like Semantic Backup Exec or Windows Server, and everyone would complain that it's so expensive. Why can't we just have like a subscription for this stuff? You got your wish.
That's what we wish for.
now now all these subscriptions are so expensive. Why can't I just buy a perpetual license? Oli, why don't you tell everybody a little bit about you?
Absolutely. So just really quick, because it's kind of my fun fact. I actually grew up in Norway. Ended up in the U.S. for college in North Dakota of all places, which Fargo, North Dakota is as cold as you would think in the winter, and then some. It's not great. I'm not in Colorado because it's much less cold. Uh, Started my first IT. I can't really call it MSP, IT company back in the 90s in 99. And did that for 10 years, merged with another company, bad idea, walked away after a year, started an MSP in 2012, grew that to about 3 point some million dollars. We acquired in 2018 a company called Summit Group Software that was a Microsoft Dynamics consultancy, tried to combine the two. Yeah, that was not a good idea. And we split it back out in 2021. Since 2021, I have been only on Dynamics side. The MSP has been sold off, and that is long gone. So I'm done with MSP after 20, some years. So it's been a while. So I got you beat by like 3 years. But yes, I remember those days of perpetual licenses, semantic backup, semantic antivirus. Yeah, small business servers, all the interesting, fun things that I'm glad are gone. More importantly, I'm kind of happy not being an MSP anymore, but it's been really interesting after that long in MSP and seeing the industry, but also understanding how hard it is. It is a tough business, but obviously being done now for a few years, I think we both have some interesting perspective on kind of how we see it. But that's my background. So now I'm in Microsoft Dynamics, Power Platform, Microsoft Dynamics, ERP, CRM, business solutions. That's all we do. I'm happy to let MSPs be MSPs.
No, that's awesome, man. Well, I appreciate you sharing that. I'm gonna launch a poll. Can we get to know you guys better? Um, I'd love to know. So some of the questions we've got, like what kind of company are you? Are you an MSP? Are you a vendor? Are you a client that somehow ended up here? We don't know. Um, what kind of role do you have? Are you like the decision maker? Are you the marketing person? Something else? And then these next two questions are going to help us like steer the conversation. So, which of these early mistakes feels most familiar? So I'll just list them out real quick. Struggling to standardize services or processes, underpricing work or discounting too often, cash flow uncertainty or slow collections, hiring too late or keeping too much work on my plate, holding on to bad fit clients, trying to be the expert in everything, or something else, other. And then the next question, where do you feel the most day to day friction in your MSP? So you can pick as many of these as you guys want. Too many one off exceptions or custom work, inconsistent margins across clients, lack of documentation or unclear processes, work getting stuck because roles aren't clearly defined, not tracking the right metrics to make decisions, growth that feels chaotic or hard to control, or something else. And then, the last question is just if you want to tell us anything else about your business or goals. I will forever remember, I couldn't tell you who it was, but somebody wrote in that field something like, the logo for our business has such and such in it. It was like completely unhinged. I loved it. So, feel free to tell us whatever you think we need to know. I'm here for it, guys. Um, so thank you for doing that. Most everyone here is an MSP, which, cool. It looks like we've got a couple who are decision makers. We've got somebody in sales and marketing. Underpricing work or discounting too often is the early mistake that feels most familiar. And then next is trying to be the expert in everything. And then looking at the day-to-day friction, too many one-off exceptions or custom work, lack of documentation or unclear processes, not tracking the right metrics, inconsistent margins across clients. Did I say not tracking the right metrics to make decisions?
Hmm.
Okay. So, yeah, that one literally we got like one across all of those. And now the new winner is underpricing work or discounting too often. For which of these early mistakes feels most familiar? So, with that, let's talk about avoiding the race to the bottom, because I got to say that is probably, possibly why you are struggling with underpricing work or discounting too often. So, Oli, when you look back, where do you think, did you ever like underprice yourself, maybe even without realizing it?
Oh yeah. I mean, when we started out, we were super cheap, and I think we were really cheap until we started the second company in 2012. Because we were trying to move from break fix in like 2009 timeframe into some kind of managed services, and it was really hard. So moving the clients that are break fix, because they're not used to, again, they're not used to having those recurring bills and that kind of stuff with you. But I think even when we started True IT, I think we were actually underpricing our stuff. I think there's actually an underlying challenge, at least for me, that was definitely true at that time, and I think for a lot of MSPs, this is true. An underlying reason why people tend to under price. And for us, that was because we didn't run a business foremost. And what I mean by that is, I'm a technical person by nature. Growing up, I was into all the technology, in the 80s and 90s. And when we started our first IT company, we did not know business. We had no clue what we're doing. We didn't look at it as a business. We were just doing technical stuff. And so, but what does that do? Well, you don't do any of the basic things a business needs. What are the metrics you're looking at? Consistency in process, all that kind of stuff. And so pricing isn't a formula. So you just kind of go, well, I mean, all right, seems like a good price. Well, but if you're not basing off of something, if you don't know what your costs are and what kind of growth you're looking at and how to feed that kind of stuff, you tend to just kind of set pricing. And I think most of us, especially for technical, we're going to set low prices, and they're not based
Mhm.
on anything. And I think, I think for at least for us, the underlying piece is we didn't think of it as a business. We didn't understand business. We had no business background, and and I think most people that wants to start an MSP or in an MSP, I think that the key is to look at it more like, no, you're a business. There are some business fundamentals that are the same. It doesn't matter what kind of business you're in. They're kind of just things you have to do to run a successful business. Having the right price is kind of actually probably one of the most important things.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Now, back when I started, I think I had the same problem. And just so you guys know, I'm keeping my hands up here, not because I'm trying to be comfortable. It prevents me from multitasking. Uh, so
It is hard.
I think so when I started my company, it was a little bit out of necessity. So I was no longer at my last IT company, and I'd always thought, I wouldn't mind starting my own business someday. I think this would be cool. I think the owner is doing a lot of things wrong. We charge, I think, and you got to remember this was like 2008. Okay. So we were charging 100 an hour, and we were doing mostly like block time. Um, we didn't, I mean, we had contracts and it was just blocks of hours, and a tech would just go sit on site somewhere and babysit, and it was ridiculous. I wanted it to be more like proactive, remote monitoring, that type of stuff. So when I started my company, that's what I did. What I didn't know is how to run a business. And it's hard, man. It's hard because you have to wear all these hats. It's not just, I'm going to go be like the coolest IT guy ever, which, by the way, you're not. None of us are cool because nobody cares about the stuff we do. Like they care if it works. They don't care how many, gigabytes of RAM you have. All right. Nobody cares. Nobody cares. All right. So get that out of your head. Once you start talking to people in a language that helps them understand where they are today, where they want to be in however many months or years, and why this project you want to uh, sell them is going to bridge that gap. It's going to take them from now to the future where they want to be. That's when you're able to start selling based on what something's worth rather than them nickel and diming you based on, well, I can go to Dell and I can get this server $46 cheaper. And if I only do RAID 0 instead of RAID 5, then I can save a whole lot of money because then I don't need any other. I'm like, no, RAID 0 means no RAID. Like, but they don't know that. They just look at price. So yeah, it's hard. It's hard because you got to be a sales guy, you got to be a marketing guy, you've got to be the accountant, bookkeeper, you've got to be the CEO, you've got to make all the decisions. You've got to be the dispatcher, you've got to be the one doing the work. You've got to be L1, L2, and L3 when you just start out and like you're the only guy. So it's tough. And if you're not, what do you do if you're not like what's the word I'm looking for? If you're not a self-starter, if you're not like, I'm gonna go learn how to be the best sales guy I can be today, what do you do, Ole?
Well, and I think that's spot on. Most of us I realize this is not going to be true for all MSPs, but I mean, I've met hundreds of MSPs over the years, and I think it's close to 100% are technical people by nature. So sales and marketing is just foreign to us, and I think you hit the nail on the head. We tend to talk about the stuff, the features,
Mhm.
the things, and the things that we think are cool, and well, you need this many gigabytes and all that kind of stuff, and ultimately business people that aren't technical, they absolutely don't care. That stuff doesn't mean value to them. That doesn't drive any kind of dollar value. So why are they going to spend more? And we've actually kind of, run into an interesting kind of way of thinking about this. Because obviously I was an MSP for 20 some years. Now we're not, and I do work with MSP, right, as a customer. And something as simple as PC setups. So our MSP charges for PC setups. But I also know you can automate that 100% through into an autopilot.
But
Why
could you
does
do that in 2008?
not in 2008 maybe? Well, I don't know. There was probably tools, but now, and so when they want to charge me for PC setups, I'm like, but why would I pay for that? That doesn't have any value. No, I know too much, right? So I'm a terrible client. No, nobody would want me as a customer of an MSP because I know too much. I know how it works and that kind of stuff. But I think for MSPs, you have to become a salesperson. And what does that mean? Well, the reality is you're not selling the things, you're selling what it does for the business. And and it's not really any different. So, we're in business applications. So we work with clients into mid-market, say, even sales teams on the CRM side or accounting on the ERP side and that kind of stuff. But ultimately we have to speak their language, right? For a CFO, they don't care. They don't care what the software is. They care what it's going to do.
Mm.
Is it going to make their life easier? Is their account ledger is going to be accurate? Is their team going to be able to pick it up? How is that changed from whatever the current working to the new thing going to work? That stuff has value. If we make those pain points go away, they will pay whatever money we need, within reason, within budget. MSPs is the same thing. It's not about the server or the one service or whatever. What is it going to do for the business and why is it going to be easy for them? Because if you don't make it easy for the customer, they're not going to spend money because they don't care if it's easy or hard, technically. Um, how do you do that? Well, you have to become a salesperson. You have to think, go read all the books, right? You talk about self-starter. It's going reading all the books, learning, talking to other people, reading Challenger Sales, like what are the ways you approach people to sell something when they don't understand the thing you're trying to sell them because they have no
Mhm.
clue and they honestly don't care. And
Yeah.
that is really hard, but you have to. So you have to become passably good at all the things until you can hire people to do it. And then you get to add another hat to your stable of jobs, which is a manager, which is probably the hardest of all of them.
Yeah. So here's my recommendation. Step number one. If you are trying to sell projects to your clients and you're trying to help them figure out where do you see yourselves in 3 years, 5 years, whatever, right? Um, have you asked yourself that question? Where do you see your MSP in 3 years? If you see your company being, I don't know, 5 times the size or whatever, right? Or maybe it's just you today and you see yourself hiring people. Write down your organization chart that you're gonna have in the future. Start thinking about those roles and put yourself in the CEO spot, right? And then let's talk about Ole, your business. So let's say, I don't know, 5 years in or so, maybe 6 years in, whatever. At some point you had like staff, you had like a manager or two, you had somebody who was like kind of in charge of all the techs. That way you didn't have to be in charge of all the techs. Maybe you had somebody that was doing sales and or marketing. That way you weren't doing sales and or marketing. Um, so talk to us about what kind of roles you think really helped you as the CEO of your company to be able to focus more on CEOing and less on the day-to-day stuff. And then tell me what CEOing looks like for you. Because if you're not, so if all of this is basically first and foremost, I think you need to get out of the tech seat early, right? You should not be the one doing the day-to-day tech support if it's your company. So if you got yourself out of some of these roles, what roles were you left with as the CEO? And that answer might be different because you might find you're really good at some things and not others. And you may decide you want to focus on certain roles instead of others than what Oli recommends, just so we're clear, guys.
Well, and I think that it's going to be very individual. And I think this is the problem with most business advice is, most business books you read say, do this thing, this is the answer, etc. And I think the problem with that is, well, it depends on the people, right? We're all unique human beings that like different things, good different things. And so I think there's some questions everybody needs to ask themselves. I think step number one is to ask, what are you trying to build? You kind of said this too, which is, are you trying to build a big business? Are you just trying to build a really profitable small business? Do you want a big staff? I mean, managing people is the hardest thing in business. I mean, it's just humans are challenging. I am too. So like I'm not excluding myself. So that I think that's step number one. And then step number two to your question, which is, what do you want to do? And so my story has been kind of interesting because I actually never was the CEO of the IT company. I had two great business partners, and we've kind of all played different roles over the years. And so Wes Henry and Zach Paulson were the two business partners, and at various times, both of them actually were the CEO. And I was always the COO. I was always the operational guy and that kind of stuff. And I thought that's what I liked. And then when we split the companies back up, I actually worked really great with consultants. They're different, the reason it didn't work is because the cultures are very different. And so I kind of ended up being an accidental CEO. And I love it. It's really interesting. I actually never thought I wanted to be a CEO. Like I was like, yeah, I'm happy to just be in the background. I don't need, you know. to do public speaking, any of that kind of stuff. And here I am a few years later doing tons of public speaking and other stuff. And it's been an interesting journey. So sometimes you don't even know what you want yourself, and you kind of have to experience things. But you do have to figure out what are the things you don't want to do, right? I think my number one advice for anyone that needs to go through that process is to go find there's a few options. Probably the one that most people have heard of at one point or another is EOS or Traction. Find one
Hmm.
of those operating systems for a business because it kind of helps you put a little bit structure on these things. It creates an accountability chart, defining out those roles, exactly what you're saying. What are all the responsibilities in your business? Who are playing those roles? So you know exactly where you are, and then figure out where you're going to grow from there, and what does that look like? Because it is actually really challenging. But I would say you got to ask yourself the first question first, which is, do you want to build that kind of business? Because I would say, we're about 32 people now, about $8 million. The hardest thing I've ever had to do is build a second level of leadership. It's also really rewarding, and I love that challenge, but it is actually really, really hard because finding the right people that, have the right personalities that fit with you, have the right skill set, and have the, kind of same philosophy of how to approach a business is really challenging. So, because I think most people just kind of go along and, whatever happens. But I think to your point is you got to figure out what are you trying to build, what are the things you don't want to do anymore, and then how do you solve those problems? Can you afford to go hire those people? If you do, how do you go find those people, or how do you grow those people internally? It is an awesome challenge, and it's been fun, but it's also easily the hardest thing I've ever done.
Yeah. And I see Sean said, for me, I started as a one man shop. I'm the lead engineer, the owner, and wear all the hats. Until you can pay yourself and not earn one penny by yourself, you can't just not work in the tech. I totally get that. I train my guys on the job constantly and wouldn't be able to do that if I didn't stay relevant. I don't believe you can be relevant and not work in the tech, but I'd love to not do anything but run the biz from a distance. I think that's fair, but I'll say this. I have not been an MSP owner for a few years now. I don't feel relevant. Um, but that's because I don't feel like I'm the right guy to like deploy Microsoft 365 to a business, right? Like, okay, maybe I'm not the guy to do that, but I still understand what would be involved in the project. I can still have people underneath me who are capable of doing the work while maybe I am more of a project manager, making sure that the work gets done, the customers are notified, and we're going through the timeline correctly. So I think it just really depends on what your goals are. If you want to stay relevant, if you enjoy doing that, then I don't think there's a problem with it. But I do think that getting out of the tech seat will allow you to like grow in your role as CEO.
Yeah, I think Sean's spot on, depending on what your size all right. Back at the MSP, I was, still involved with the techie stuff. I still stayed up with everything. I could do a lot of the work. And over the last few years, I've really stepped out of it. So I think the key is somebody has to do what you're talking about, Sean, is to kind of, coach those people, put in place, the systems and the processes to make sure everybody's doing it consistently. But it doesn't actually have to be you. The ideal would be to eventually be able to hire people that can rise to become those people for you. So like at True North, I I can't do most of the consulting. I can't do most of the work. Now, um, Sean used the word current. Absolutely. I do have to stay current on what Microsoft's doing, what Dynamics Power Platform, where is it going, what does the future hold, how do we approach it, how do we communicate with clients and that kind of stuff. But it's a higher level thinking. I don't know the details of all this stuff, but I do need to understand what's going on. So I would agree, Sean, 100%. But but I have an amazing leadership team that then can do the piece that you're talking about, which is making sure the team knows exactly how they're doing it the right way, and that kind of stuff. But that's the key, is that until you have that person, you're right, you have to do that. But I think it is really important if you want to grow past probably 10 people, you're gonna have to find somebody else that can do that piece, because I think it's really hard to run an organization and also be that deep in the day-to-day. Because you asked me the question, Steve, like, what does CEO look like for me? Um, for me, it's actually finally the point where I can spend a lot of my time thinking about the business. It's being on webinars. I can go to events. I can do speaking engagements. Obviously, work with the leadership team, doing recurring check-ins with the team. Not the whole team, but leadership team, to make sure we're on the right track. But actually taking time to think, because if you're running a business, if you don't have time to think, you're probably not going to go very far. And that's really hard. And honestly, it was really hard for me to stop and take the time and go for a drive for a couple hours and just think. That's my thing. I go for a drive. Because I have to focus on driving, it kind of I can't overthink, so then I can just kind of freely think and that kind of stuff. So that's my mechanism of doing that, and that's been really invaluable. It was hard to do that because I don't feel like I'm doing anything, right? I'm like, I'm not doing anything.
Mhm.
Well, but you are, because once you're the leader of organization, your job isn't necessarily to do the stuff, is to make sure the whole is doing the stuff. Now, the details of that is different when you're small versus as you grow. But I think kind of actually both of our earlier point, it is what are the things you really enjoy doing. If you would ask me 5 years ago, I wouldn't have expected that I would want to do what I'm doing today, but I actually really love it. And so that worked out for me. If you really love the technical stuff, well, I mean, one option is to find somebody else to be the CEO. I mean, it,
You can still own the company and
yeah,
not be the CEO.
100%.
You can be the COO. You can be the, whatever you want to be.
You can even be a tech if you're. I mean, it might be a little hard to own or be a detailed tech, but I think it's what do you want in life, right? We only have one life, as far as we know, and what do you want to do in life? What are the things you want to do and that kind of stuff. Um, and now it's hard to know that, but try the different things, and then as you go, is to make plans each year for how do you find people that can help augment the things that you don't want to do. Um, Because why not? So don't limit yourself. I had never thought I would be CEO. I actually never thought I could be CEO, like, imposter syndrome, all that kind of stuff. And
Sure.
I've been working with a CEO coach over the last few years, and that's been instrumental for me because it helped me kind of get out of my own way and to be like, why are you creating self-limitations? Um, if you have something you want to accomplish, then go do it. Stop stopping yourself. Anyway, um, and so I would highly recommend, if you don't have a mentor of some kind in your life, somebody who's willing to challenge you, and it's gonna be hard. In fact, if you have a mentor and you don't sometimes kind of like, I don't want to talk to them today because they're gonna piss me off. You want to find a mentor that's willing to tell you
Mhm.
the hard truth. We all need that. I mean, or maybe it's just me. Maybe I just need the hard truth sometimes. But that has actually been easily the most important thing I ever did, was to find somebody that was willing to challenge me.
Or, that's good. All right. So what we're going to do now is we're actually going to take a brief commercial break, but that doesn't mean now is the time to go refill your beverage. Okay. Please just pay attention. We'll make it fun. Ole, can you let everybody know what it is that TruNorth Dynamics does and why MSP should work with you?
Yeah, so we do what I would call business applications, CRM, ERP, but we focus on Microsoft. So everything Microsoft, Power Platform, Dynamics, everything from obviously CRM, or it's actually called Sales Hub, to Business Central on the accounting side, and everything in between. And we do that for kind of any industry, anything from a relatively small business, think like 50 people, all the way up into a lower end of enterprise. We will be into enterprise eventually, but so like mid-market would be like co-managed. So we can handle everything from that. And so the big difference is we're into the business. So we're working with the sales teams. It could be, a manufacturing company that may have a, warehouse team, transportation, raw material sourcing, and building systems to track all that cohesively and give them data so they know what's going on in the business. So we'll do everything from implementing those, integrating with other systems, customizations, kind of anything they need to solve a business problem, right? So now those are the tools we use, but ultimately in the end, we're here to solve business problems. They have problems in their business with their technology around the software, and we help them kind of solve those problems. Now, how does that tie in with MSPs? Well, it's kind of adjacent, right? We don't do any of the other work. We don't do help desk. We don't do security. We don't do, servers or, Office 365, any of those kinds of things. We are laser focused on this piece. But what does happen is MSPs have clients that have these needs. And oftentimes what MSP will do when a client asks is that we don't deal with that. But that's not a good idea because I at least believe, most MSPs do some form of VCO, right? Technology
Mm.
advising, whatever you want to call it. But if you're telling the client, if they come to you about, say, accounting software, and you're like, yeah, we don't deal with that. Well, you're not actually advising them on technology because that is technology. But just because you advise them doesn't mean you have to do it. So I think the key for MSPs is to build partnerships with a variety of areas that they don't do work in. If you don't do cabling, find a cabling company to partner with. If you don't do copiers, find a copier place to work with. If you don't do business applications, find a company like TruNorth that can work with you on that and do that for your clients. Because then anytime your client comes to you with anything that touches technology, you have an answer. And it may be like, hey, that's a great question. I have a great partner you should talk to. Because if you start saying no, they're going to stop coming to you. How many MSPs have run into the problem? Because we did it many, many times. You get that random call and like, oh yeah, the copier guy is here and he needs an IP for the copier. Yeah, they didn't talk to you ahead of time. Now you have an emergency ticket that you have to drop everything to do, and you don't have a choice but to do it, and it's really annoying. Well, if you train your clients to always come to you, well, then they will come to you. And now you're aware of those things, but to make sure you have an answer, even if it's kind of handing it off to a partner. So most of our 80% of our sales now is partner in some fashion with an MSP, because MSPs have all these clients and we can help them solve these specific problems that most MSPs don't do. Because you can't be an expert in everything. I know some people may disagree with that, but you just can't. It's hard to be good at lots of different things. So we are laser focused on the business application space, and my goal is to be the absolute best. And I think we're pretty damn good, and we'll just keep focusing on getting better and better every day.
It's incredible. You know, something I wish I understood earlier is that pricing and margins don't matter if cash flow is unpredictable. Back when I ran my MSP, we were profitable on paper, but because we were invoicing manually, sending reminders manually, reconciling manually, everything downstream got stressful. A late invoice meant a delayed project, hardware the customer wasn't getting on time, or maybe just me losing sleep. That's actually the whole reason we built alternative payments. We wanted MSPs to have cash flow that's consistent, automatic, accurate, without adding more admin work to the team. The first thing that MSPs usually love is the client payment portal. Their clients can log in, they can see current and past invoices, pay them, store payment methods, update, ACH credit cards. Clients can even turn on auto pay themselves. It's simple, it's a clean interface. Clients understand it immediately and they actually use it. That alone removes a ton of friction. The second piece is the processing. ACH, credit cards, debit cards. But the real magic is how everything ties together behind the scenes. So The biggest value is that we offer accounts receivable automation. So MSPs are going to create the invoice in their PSA. They'll sync it to QuickBooks or Microsoft Dynamics, since we're having a conversation about ERPs and Dynamics. And then we kind of take over from there. We send the invoice, we run the payment if auto pay is on, we mark it paid. When we deposit the funds, we automatically match and reconcile any absorbed fees. So that way, when your bank feed hits QuickBooks, when you download that latest bank feed, uh, everything just matches cleanly. No chasing numbers, no human error, no what does this deposit belong to moments. And if you've got a project your client really needs, but the timing is tight, we offer short term financing with reasonable single digit interest rates. It helps clients say yes, it keeps projects moving. So, bottom line, all the pricing strategy and operational discipline that we're going to talk about here soon, it works so much better when the cash flow side is stable. And that's why we built alternative payments to make the financial side predictable so you can actually run the business, not chase the business. So what I'm going to do, I'm sorry, Ole, I'm going to run a poll for you here in a moment. I screwed up and I didn't run it. I'm gonna launch a poll for alternative payments. Um, if you want to explore whether this is going to solve cash flow and billing headaches that you're feeling, just pick yeah. Conversation couldn't hurt. If you're already a customer, you can mark that. If you're not interested at all, let us know that too. I'm going to leave this poll up for a couple minutes. I'll let you guys know when I'm launching the poll for TruNorth Dynamics. Uh, but until then, we're going to launch right back into the education. So I kind of alluded to the fact that we need to uh, build some financial discipline early, Oli. So is there a financial mistake you wish somebody would have warned you about? Or were you lucky in the fact that you had other partners and collectively you made fewer bad decisions?
I Knowing what I know now, I don't think I would have listened anyway. I mean, I think having somewhat innate confidence sometimes it doesn't match reality. And my understanding of finance, 20 years ago was zero. Obviously, I've
Yeah.
learned a lot in the meantime. So I mean, even just thinking back, I'm not sure I would have listened. But it is really true, and that's back to my comment about business. Number one, you have to understand accounting, at least to an extent. There's managerial accounting books, so they're not as deep, right? You're not getting into ledgers necessarily and that kind of stuff. But understanding a balance sheet, make sure you understand how it works. Uh, but honestly, the number one, cash, cash, cash. You made a comment that you were making money on the paper. Most businesses are accrual basis. Yeah, but the thing that will kill you and make you go out of business is running out of cash. And you can make tons of money on the books, uh, and actually run out of cash and go out of business. Which is actually kind of why we're uh, on this call. Back when we started, something like alternative payments didn't even exist. So fun fact, so Wes, my business partner, and I, we actually wrote the code for Connect Booster originally as part of our first IT company, um, because we saw this need that, why isn't collecting money from clients more automated? This is silly.
Mhm.
So we wrote that code for ourselves, and then we met some other people to with B&G Technologies and Holdings to start Connect Booster. We dropped out of Connect Booster pretty early on, which in hindsight maybe it wasn't a
And
good decision on my
hindsight,
part.
that felt like a terrible idea now, huh?
In hindsight, it was a bad idea, but at the time, I had small kids, doing two jobs. It was too much in my life at that time, and I chose to sell out for a little bit. It wasn't very much, but it is what it is. So this space is really near to my heart, and which is why we're on this webinar, because we obviously love working with alternative payments, and you guys have some unique tools that
Hmm.
even Connect Booster doesn't have, ignoring the Kaseya factor, but maybe we should not talk about that. Um, but but finding ways to automate things in accounting is probably the thing that we would have done more of early on. At that time, there just wasn't many tools. Now, the cool part, there's so many tools to do this stuff, and so automate as much of the stuff as possible. Accounting sucks. I mean, I realize
Yeah.
accountants probably hate me saying this, but it's true.
I
I
don't
hate
think I'm
accounting.
allowed to say that, just so we're clear. I think
Okay.
that's one of those things I'm not allowed. You can say it all you
I can
want,
say
though.
it. It sucks. It's
Yeah.
it's a hard business. So fine. But I think that's actually kind of part of my general message anytime I'm talking about even what we're doing. It's not really so much about True North and business applications, even though that is obviously important to us. But for MSPs, it's all about partnerships, partnerships, partnerships. Alternative payments is one of them. Find a partner that can help you with automating that kind of stuff. Again, finding I mean, if you do, copiers don't, but that kind of stuff, and finding ways to work with other people. Rarely are we going to do cool stuff by ourselves.
Yeah.
The reason True North is fairly successful, we have an amazing team. Not because of me. Obviously, I do contribute. At least I think so. But ultimately, doing it together. But I would say, probably the biggest thing for me is find ways to automate all the crap that you don't want to do because, accounting is just. I used to do the QuickBooks accounting, which should scare anyone that knows me because I am not a detail person, and but somehow I made it
Sure.
work. We never ran out of cash, I guess. So I did something kind of right.
I love how he says, I guess. We never ran out of cash, I guess.
I think we got close a few times. Anyway, but that's
I'm gonna go.
but yeah.
I'm gonna go ahead and launch that poll for True North. If any of you are interested in seeing how Ole and his team could help your MSP, and I just want to clarify, um, this is like maybe you've got some clients who are Microsoft Dynamics companies, and maybe you just want somebody who knows more than you. Like we said earlier, being everything to everyone is tough, and partnering with a company like True North or other companies that you make strategic partnerships with is actually going to strengthen your brand, as crazy as that sounds, because the more you kind of take off your plate, then the more you can focus on what your team is really good at, which will help you charge more money because you guys are going to be better at a little bit. It's that whole inch wide, mile deep versus mile wide, inch deep.
Well, I
All
think that
right.
ties into the technology advising because
Mm-hmm.
clients don't value the stuff MSPs do. They just don't. They don't care. What do they value is they know what's going on, they know where it's going, kind of what to expect, budgeting, all the boring stuff, right? I mean, I know nobody loves this stuff necessarily, but that is the kind of stuff that clients wants to know. They have their own problems, right? They have their business to run, they have cash flow accounting issues, all that kind of fun stuff. And the more you can advise them where to go and what to do with those things, even if you don't do it, they're gonna value you. And I would assume all MSPs would want their client to see them as the oracle of anything technology, but you can't do all this stuff. And I think, we did this mistake many times. We try to do we got into we got into web design, we got into some software development, uh, we got into some software stuff at one point, and hey, if you have the scale to do that and you have people that can do it also, there's nothing wrong with that. But we were never big enough as an MSP to touch any of that stuff. In hindsight, that was all mistakes. But I think most people tend to make those same mistakes, like changing tools. I think we changed RMM, 6 times in that time frame, probably. A terrible idea. You should not do that because they're just tools. They all have their problems. You know, Switching is not going to solve all your problems.
Yeah. So, and I'm sorry, I might butcher this. Tabiso says that it's cool that there's many things that can be automated. I feel, however, to architect, design, and integrate things for automating, it takes a hell of a lot of time and resources and perhaps capital. where before you know it, you've spent 18 months just automating and integrating. It's a huge investment when you're living hand to mouth with a small team. Would you all agree, or do you have any comment on that?
Well, from my standpoint, I mean, I think that's actually pretty true. But it's like anything in business, right? It's what's the ROI? What's your investment in doing these things? What is it going to do for your business, and is it worth it? I'm not sure that's any different than any change or things that you want to do or implement in your business. Changing an RMM, right? I mean, I'm not saying you should never do it. I'm saying if you're going to do it, you got to look at the full cost, the people cost, the time cost, the capital cost, and is that legit going to solve any business, any real challenges in your business to move you forward to make that investment is worth it? And it is hard, but to me, that comes down to planning and digging into it. And if you don't do those things, yeah, we didn't. I mean, just thinking back, we would switch an RMM and it's like, oh, this is going to be easy. Yeah, it was never easy.
It's always way easier than you thought it would be. Every time, always. Right? Wrong?
Yeah, that's true.
So much easier than you thought it would be. All right. Um,
Business is not ever easy, I don't think.
so easy. So easy to
Uh,
be. So hopefully we gave you a little bit of insight there. I'll say this. It's easy to get caught up in like the new tool syndrome. So there's if you guys are musicians like I am, there's a term we use called gas, GAS, like the stuff you put in your car, unless it's a Tesla. And gas stands for gear acquisition syndrome. And what it means is we like to go to sweetwater.com or guitarcenter.com and we just like buy things. Like, I want this new guitar pedal. What's it do? The same thing as these other three I have. Okay, so why do you need that one? Because it sounds a little bit better. Are you sure? No. So it's easy for MSPs to kind of get into that gear acquisition syndrome effect. I remember I was really good at signing up for tools. There's tools for everything. There's um, and I just want to clarify, I'm going to list off some tools. It doesn't mean they're bad tools. It just means there's a tool for freaking everything, right? So back in the day, there was Rapid Fire, the network detective, right? There was emerging Microsoft 365 management tools because there's still, to my knowledge, I don't think there's like a central partner wants to manage all their clients tool from Microsoft yet, right? Um, like you still want to use something like SIP by Cyberdrain or one of those like third party 365 management tools. There was LabTech. Boy, am I aging myself when I call it that. And then there were all of the plugins that you could purchase for LabTech in order to make it I'll say suck a little bit less. Not because it actually sucked, but because it sucked for me because I bought it and expected it to just magically do all these things. And I was like, oh, I have to like write all these automations still. And then, there's Roost, if you want to get real big into automations, robotic process automation is a thing. Um, and then, maybe you don't want to rely on one of these platforms. Maybe you just want to write something yourself and you want to get your own API broker like N8N or something like that, where now you've got a little more flexibility. Where if you want to take your ball and go home, all your scripts will work. If you go somewhere else, you just got to put them in the new API broker. Whereas with Roost, you're kind of stuck with their, what do they call them, crates, right? So you're stuck with their system. So if you want to go somewhere else, now you're rebuilding everything. So there's pros and cons, and you're absolutely right. Where 18 months later, huge investment later, it doesn't feel like you're anywhere farther than you were when you started, other than maybe you've automated a bunch of stuff. And is automating all of that stuff really helpful? It depends on what you've automated. What what information, what data did you rely on to decide what to automate? Or did you just do it because of a gut feeling and a cool, shiny new toy?
Well, I think common one is people, we used to do this, go to a conference, you see all the cool new stuff, and it's,
Mm-hmm.
they're convincing, they're salespeople, and it sounds amazing. But I think all of this actually comes back to, I think, where I started this, 45 minutes ago, is you have to run as a business. And what I mean by that is, where are you going? What are you building? What are your goals? Because if you don't look at those things, now when you see new tools, automation, even alternative payments, right? I mean, there is a small investment in implementing alternative payments. I don't think it's
Absolutely.
significant, but it does take some time. But, so if you literally have zero payment issues, like everything is working amazing, well, maybe it's not worth it. I have never ever heard a business ever say that. So, it's one that probably makes sense, but you got to look at your business. And one of the things that we've learned, especially as we've grown a little bit, is that prioritization is incredibly important. So we do quarterly offsites with the leadership team, which is a lot. Most companies do yearly. I think, we're a full remote company, so we try to get at least leadership together once a quarter. We obviously have our yearly goals, but then we also have our quarterly goals. And major things doesn't fit in, right? So if I run into something cool somewhere, we're not just going to do it because I thought it was cool. We may pull into next offsite and be like, hey, is this going to really make a difference for our business? Is this going to really make something more efficient, easier, solve a problem with our client or create, remove friction and make sure you have a process for kind of vetting those out. So never just do it just because you got to exactly to your point, look, you got to look at your data. Like, what are the problems in your business and is going to actually solve any? If not, don't do it. Just because it's cool doesn't mean it's worth it. Um, and for me, it is building a leadership team that's willing to say no, right? Some people love building a leadership team of yes people that just goes along with whatever you want. Personally, I think that's a bad mistake. I don't have all the answers. I want people that are challenging each other and figuring stuff out. So when these things come up and somebody is like, we should do this one thing, everybody comes together and goes, okay, what is this going to do for us in, Q1? Is that the thing we're going to focus on to really move our business where it needs to go, for the first quarter of 2026? If not, you should not do it. And so for us, it's been growing up as a business, if you will, and kind of be more operational mature and kind of having these, what I call basic processes for how to approach these things, removes some of that gut feeling piece. It's like, I used to go to Best Buy all the time and I would just buy stuff. And it's like, now my rule is if I see something, I have to leave, sleep on it. The next day, if I still think I need it, I can go back and buy it. Yeah, I just could never go buy and back anything. So again, it's putting in those little friction points that makes it harder to do those things, and usually it kind of helps it. Because if you're going to make a change, you got to be committed to it. You got to be willing to say, no, this is important, and we're going to do this, and it's going to make us better. And so if you find yourself spending 18 months on something, and then you're like, what the heck? That probably means there's some planning pieces that you need to add to your business, which is where my advice of like traction or EOS comes in. It does help because it just contains some of those things and it forces you to ask yourself, do I really have time for this? Like, is this something that we can actually fit in right now? Or are there more important things to do in our business? Because Radius, you'll never run out of stuff to do. It doesn't matter. Uh, Things change, economy change, people change, clients change, sales changes. So prioritization is easily one of the most important things in a business. And as a CEO, that's kind of my job, right? Where are we going and how do I help make sure that we're focused on all the right things? So if you don't do any kind of EOS or something similar, Gazelle, there's a bunch of them. Go do one of them. Doesn't matter which one you pick. Just pick one.
Yeah. Just like with cybersecurity, right? I'm not here to argue if NIST is better than um oh great, the other one, CIS controls. We're not here to argue which one's better. Um I would maybe argue that CIS is probably easier for somebody that doesn't know what they're doing, or is really difficult for them to make decisions just because they've got like blueprints, like, here, make all these settings changes on Microsoft 365 and then this will cover all of, so like there are reasons to pick one, but I think if you have good reasons to pick the other, it's not like it's a wrong choice. So
Hmm.
yeah, pick an OS, pick a management strategy, if you will, and move forward from there. Well, hey guys, it is 1 o'clock. So I thank you all for attending. Oli, this was so much fun, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I appreciate it. It's a fun conversation.
Absolutely. We have another one coming up on Thursday. If you guys would like to learn more about the 3 AI services you should be offering to your clients right now, you should sign up for that one. But until then, I will see you guys next time. And you guys have a great rest of your day. Take care, guys.
Thanks, everybody.